Hello, everybody. Hello, and welcome to Side Hustle Ideas. I'm Bill, the company's expert. Thank you for joining me today. This is episode number 94 of Side Hustle Ideas. This is called The Truth About MBAs. Should you get one? Live Q&A. So we're going to be talking about that today. And as always, a shout out goes out to my YouTube channel members. All right? Membership has its privileges. My Patreons, my super thanks donors, and of course to you, viewers. Thank you for being here. You know what? There's so much intro stuff to do today. I'm starting to lose track. As always, I have a live challenge for everybody. Get in the chat and let me know of your favorite side hustle idea for starting a business, an entrepreneurial type idea. Those are always cool. We can kick it around. And this is like the title suggests, it's a Q&A. So if you're seeing my beautiful face, you should see a chat box somewhere nearby. Get in the chat. And if you've been a subscriber to my channel for any amount of time, you should be able to ask questions. So that's what we're here to do. I'm going to do a little bit of a monologue at the beginning, and then I'm going to open it up to questions. And just to kick things off, there's a little bit of news on my end. I have a website, okay, and this is the website, if I can get this thing working. Here we go. And I just noticed today, if you go to Google and you look at the second search result for the company's expert, you get a fraudulent website. So this is my website, and this is somebody else's website. That's like a phishing site, so do not go there. They've also goofed up the spelling in the URL. So this is the company's expert, EIS, and of course you spell companies IES, so it's a fraudulent site. Do not go there. Something that might tip you off is this totally amateur font that they're using. As we all know, I would never use something like that. I have much too much style. So that was something I found out, I discovered just a little while ago. So there you go. Yeah, and back to your regularly scheduled program. Okay, let's talk about the title, The Truth About MBAs. Now, full disclosure, I have an MBA and I also have an MBA course, right? Okay, but I believe I can talk about the value of MBAs because I actually have one. There's a lot of people out there that are talking about how good or bad they think they are when they don't actually have one. So they can't really speak to its value because they don't really know what the hell they're talking about. So let's get into this. I'm going to take a couple of questions right off the bat because there's a couple of people here. 9112 Racing says, crap, I'm literally on the capstone of my MBA right now. Listen, hey, you're taking it. That's good. And it's a good thing. So don't worry about it. Don't doubt yourself. It's good. Whichever way you slice it, it's good stuff to know. The only real question mark, I think, is the time required to take it. Okay, there's an opportunity cost there. Instead of out earning money, you're in school, sometimes for a couple of years, right? Is that worth it? That's the only question. And the amount of the cost attributed to the program, that's another big thing. If they're charging you $200,000 or something to take it, which some people do, Harvard, is that worth it? Are you going to get that back, right? So that's kind of the only real question, right? The cost of the program, and then it's going to be, the payoff is going to be a difference between the compensation you are getting after having your MBA versus what you would have gotten if you hadn't gotten the MBAs. That's the big question, right? Okay. So don't doubt yourself, Racing. If you're taking this thing, it's going to be useful. The only question is how much money you paid for it and all this. Tacticool Allen says, I'm working towards defense industry startup. Okay, I'm looking for an MBA or master's in economics. Okay, well, those are two kind of separate things, right? An MBA and a master's in economics, they're quite a bit different. There obviously is some overlap. You do take economics if you're going and, taking MBA. You probably will take one economics course as part of the standard MBA package. Unless you're specializing in economics or something, you might take 4 economics courses or something like that, But if you're doing a master's in economics, obviously you're going the full 9 yards. You're doing everything in economics, and you're taking it to strange new heights, right? So a little bit of a different thing. Also, the use for which they apply economics. An MBA, you could argue, is almost like applied economics, whereas when you study economics, I imagine you do a lot of theoretical stuff too, right? So that's kind of the deal. Okay, let's get into this here. We talked about the fraudulent website. We talked about the live challenge, right? That I think Tactical is taking me up on. Let's get into the MBA thing. Okay, so first of all, before we get started, it's on your screen, so I just want to mention it. Yes, I offer an MBA course, $100, everything you would learn in a standard MBA program. And the reason why I can say this is because you're basically looking at the same source material as an MBA. You're reading all the textbooks, including some of the textbooks they use in places like Harvard Business School. They're industry standard textbooks, the best of the bunch across the board. And instead of being read to you in class, essentially, you're reading them on your own, and it's a self-study thing. And the reason I did this program is because it's flexible. Not everybody can take 2 years off their life, go back to school full time, and do this. The other reason is that you might not want to go that deep. You might want to have a knowledge of these subjects, but you don't necessarily want to devote 2 years of your life to studying them in depth. That's not the solution for everybody in every situation. So some people like to just take it, and what they'll do is they'll skim the material. Or they might go deep in 1 or 2 areas, but that's it. They don't go deep in all 10 or 12, right? So whatever your personal needs are, that's why I created that course. You could do it on your own schedule. You could go as deep as you want or shallow as you want, as selective as you want, and it's entirely self-study, so it works on your schedule and your timing, basically. So if you're interested in that kind of thing, check out the link in the description. It's $100, not $100,000, $100. Okay, right, let's get into this. So what do you learn in an MBA? Let's start off with that. A lot of people don't know. A lot of people are curious. MBA is an incredibly useful thing to know. If you just want to manage your money, learning finance is pretty damn important. If you want to understand what banks do with your money, how you go to the bank and you can put your money into an account, and they have a manager of some kind, like a fund manager, a personal banker. They will tell you, okay, this is the different things you can invest in, which one do you want, right? Having some understanding of what the hell they're actually doing, that's a big part of it. And that's the tip of the iceberg in terms of what you can do with money. If you have any money, to speak of on the side, you can invest it. Even if it's like $1,000, you can put that into the bank, and you could put it in standard things, or you could do more exotic things with it. There's a whole ton of options there. Finance will teach you that. It's what the rich people use to make sure that they don't flush their money down the toilet doing stupid things. Okay? You understand money. That's the study of finance. Finance is essentially the study of money in the future, right? What to do with your money. What are your options? Things like risk and return, comparing apples to oranges, how you do that, right? You also study things like accounting. Accounting is also money, but it's more money in the past. It's not about the future. It's basically, traditionally, about what went on. Where did the money go? How much money did we make? These are all questions about things that happened in the past, right? Or the present, like how much stuff do we own? What's its value right now? Things like that, right? That's also accounting, right? So the first thing that you get from studying finance and accounting is you can understand basic financial statements. There's the 4 big financial statements, right, that are universal. And that's like the language of business. If you want to understand what's going on with a business, you look at their financial statements, and that gives you a good snapshot of like what the hell's going on, right? How they're doing. And you can read that. So that's kind of the first thing. You can have intelligent conversations about business and financial affairs because you understand accounting and finance, and you can read financial statements. What are some other things that you learn in an MBA? The other big one is marketing. Marketing is the scientific study of customers or potential customers. So how to sell to people, things like sales, that's like a subset of marketing. Who your target market is, how do you communicate with them? How do you convince them to do business with you? Things like this. How do you understand what their needs are so that your business can produce something that meets their needs or meets their wants? This kind of thing. All of that is marketing, this huge umbrella. And what you're going to find in business is that they teach you in an MBA several almost isolated subjects like finance, accounting, marketing, and then there's many more. And each of these are a unique perspective. So you can look at a situation or a problem from multiple perspectives, right? If you have an accountant in charge, everything is a cost that must be reduced. If you have a finance person in charge, everything is a potential investment. If you have a marketing person in charge, everything is an opportunity to make sales and deal with the customer, right? So you get complex situations in this world where, we could do a thing. The accountant won't like it because it's going to cost money, but the marketing person will love it. The chief marketing officer will love it because it's a strategic opportunity to branch out and upsell and, get some synergy and all this kind of stuff. So, you can look at the same thing, and if you wear multiple hats, you can see through multiple perspectives. It gives you a really complex insight onto what actually is going on here, and then you can make decisions as to which thing is the right thing to do when you look at every perspective, right? You look at that same thing through the lens of organizational theory, and you think like, okay, that includes things like PR, public relations, HR, stuff like that, image, even like leadership, stuff like that. And you think like, wow, we really shouldn't do that thing because that could give us some kind of weird, terrible reputation. We could be perceived as people that do this, and we don't want to do that, right? But then you could look at it from a legal or ethical standpoint and say, well, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, just because you have rules in place for this, what works for people and what the rules say, those can be two different things. Sometimes it's obviously the right thing to do is to follow the rules. Other times there's a gap between what the rules say and what people want to do, or even what your customers expect, or this kind of thing. So you can look at it through multiple perspectives and get different perspectives. I'm not giving you some very good examples off the top of my head, but hopefully you get the idea. Okay, so you learn, I'll just summarize the other ones. You learn things like operations, right? How to produce a thing in a company, things like efficiency. All the stuff that you might have heard of, like Six Sigma, Lean, all that kind of stuff, that's firmly in operations. Quality, that kind of stuff. You learn economics, like our good friend Tactical Alan, or Alan Tactical, mentioned. You learn innovative ideas. You learn leadership. Leadership is basically how to influence people, right? So it's one thing to make the rules. It's another thing to get people to want to follow them, or to get them to follow them, one way or another, either because they want to or because they're compelled to. But you need to get people to follow the rules. If you can't execute something, there's no point in dreaming it up in the first place. There's a lot of different skills in there. Obviously, communication. You learn how to communicate to people on different levels, all this kind of stuff. You learn things like negotiation, very, very useful thing there. Learning how to create win-win deals, right? So when you propose something to somebody, it's not simply like you're discussing price, where it's like one variable and it's like a win-lose. If I get more, that means you get less. If you get more, that means I get less, right? Instead of doing that, you figure out ways to like, how can we make a deal where you get something that you really want and I get something I really want at the same time, right? That tends to get a lot better results in the real world, So many different areas, right? I'm sure I'm missing a ton of them. But this is what you learn. Now, what I would put forward to you, okay, what we're talking about here today is whether an MBA is useful. What I would throw out there, and you guys can tell me if you agree, is that learning all the stuff I mentioned and more, okay, is good. It's a good thing. I don't care if you're a blue collar worker, you're in the skilled trades, this can benefit you tremendously knowing all this stuff. If you have to deal with money, you will know how to deal with money. You will not be taken in by scams. You will understand. One of the things you learn in an MBA is entrepreneurship. That's why we're talking about it here. Being able to start something from scratch. That's damn useful. I don't care if you're rich white collar person or a poor blue collar person or a rich blue collar person. Being able to start your own thing from scratch and have it work and be successful and make money is a tremendous thing, right? So I would put to you that this knowledge is just good, hands down, okay? Obtaining this knowledge is a good thing. We're not going to debate whether these things are useful or not. Yes, they are. They're useful pretty much to everyone. They might not be, a central core thing of what you do, but it's kind of an ancillary knowledge. It's very useful. So the only question really is the cost and the trouble of getting an MBA, the time involved, the things you miss out on, whether that is worth it for you to obtain this knowledge, right? That's the way I see it. That's the only relevant way to frame this question. If this was the Matrix and you could download, all the knowledge into your head in 5 seconds, it would be a no-brainer. Everyone would know this stuff, right? Who would want not to understand money? You know what I mean? The more you know, the more money you will have and the more successful you will be. It's just a no-brainer. Okay, I'm going to take a break to answer a few questions here. We got some questions. Lydia says, I have a job where I work with clients. I'm getting a new client, a nonprofit to business tomorrow. How do I start a good relationship with them? Okay, this doesn't really have anything to do with any of the topics here, but okay, if we're starting from absolute scratch, here's what you do, Lydia. Just remember this, okay? In-person communication is always better than remote communication, right? So the way it goes is face-to-face is the best type of communication. Failing that, a video call, something like that, failing that, a phone call, because at least it's in real time and you can get an immediate response, right? You can sense the tone of someone's voice, so the color of what you're saying, right? Then it goes into all the other kind of textual type ways of communicating. Text, email, letters, all that stuff is right down here, okay? So the best way to maintain positive relationships with people in general is just always to do the types of communication at the top, face-to-face as much as you possibly can. It's the most labor intensive. There's problems with it. You have to invest the most time and effort, but it is the best way to communicate. What a lot of people do is they're tempted to just do all their communication by email, or text. And from an efficiency point of view and a convenience point of view, it is superior, but it is terrible for maintaining positive relationships. When people get communication, they can't understand the tone, and that's pretty damn big, right? If I say to you, hey, it's really good to meet you, I'm communicating one thing. If I were to say, hey, it's really good to meet you, I'm communicating something else, right? But you see how important the difference is between those two things that I just did, right? But when you're typing it out in an email, you don't know the tone, and normal human behavior, unfortunately, is for people to assume the worst. So when there is no tone, there's a lack of tone, people will insert a negative tone, and that's how they'll interpret all of your communications, right? So it's things like this, right, that matter. Taking the trouble to communicate to people when it may not be absolutely necessary, you don't know, but doing it anyway people generally appreciate that. Unless they tell you otherwise, they appreciate that. That's a good assumption to make, even though, once again, it goes against efficiency for you, okay? Maintaining good relationships and doing things in an efficient way are usually polar opposites. They tend to go like this, right? Okay, so, I mean, those are some basic principles to start out with. Hopefully that makes sense. If you want to get into more specifics, let me know. Emmy says, bonjour from Montréal, Québec. Bonjour. Qu'est-ce qu'il y a? Thank you for being here. ER says, question. Like in all caps. Question. The general manager texted me asking me for my preferred interview schedule, which I provided. Last Thursday. I sent a follow-up on Friday. Up till now, I've not heard from them. Was I ghosted? Well, it depends on your definition of ghosting. How many days need to go by before you interpret it as ghosting? Usually ghosting, like, look, I don't know if there's a definition on this, but my impression is that if you have regular back and forth communication, like, every day or every couple of days, and then bam, it just stops, right? Now, there could be many reasons. Maybe someone's gone on vacation. You don't know, right? Maybe someone is extraordinarily busy. They just had something dropped into their lap on that day. Everything else took a back seat. This stuff has been known, okay? So you never really know. But based on what you've described, it does kind of sound like it's ghosting. We'll see how it goes. It's not certain. Okay? Best thing to do is to try and follow up. Now, don't, if you can do this. Don't communicate by text. Show up in person. Just say, hey, what's going on? Just wanted to follow up. See, I was in the neighborhood, just wanted to follow up. Right? That's the most powerful kind of thing. And it's usually the most positive communication, right? We were just kind of talking about that. Emmy Lizeth says, MBA is great. What are your thoughts on executive MBA? So for those who don't know, an executive MBA, at least my understanding of it, is it's a accelerated MBA. So instead of being in 2 years, they try and do it in 1. Okay. And there's other kind of things there where they skip some of the work and they just give it to you in a compact form. Supposedly, allegedly, it's for working professionals that are in executive positions, but I don't know about that. I think they'll sell it to anyone, really, to be honest with you. That's the pattern in education. Now, I do not have an executive MBA, so my ability to comment on it is limited. I'm a little bit skeptical of it. Okay? To learn things properly, you got to put in the work and you got to put in the time. That's just it. That's just how it goes. And as you shave down like the program and the material and the curriculum and, the case studies and the work you have to do, it gets, in my opinion, all things being equal, it gets correspondingly less valuable. So they position it as, something better somehow because you're in class with executives, but you're already an executive, so that shouldn't really matter. But I'm skeptical. Like I don't know because I've never taken an executive MBA, and I haven't dealt with a lot of people that I'm aware of that have taken an executive MBA. A lot of people I deal with just take an MBA. It's not an executive MBA; they just have an MBA. So I'm not sure. I would be skeptical of, like, based on my personal experience of dealing with academia, and in particular, some of the more money-making aspects of academia where they're trying to woo students, to spend money. They're treating students like customers. I'd be a little suspicious of claims that, like, this is quicker yet better. I would verify that. What I would do is I'd go on LinkedIn. I do a search for executive MBA, like in your city or region. I would find people in positions that you are, maybe ambitious to be in that position who have executive MBAs, and I'd reach out to them and I'd say, like, could I do a quick phone call with you? Or, or could we have like can I get half an hour of your time? I just like to ask some questions about your executive MBA. I'm thinking of doing one myself, and I'm just wondering, I would like to be able to sit down with somebody who's gone through one and ask you about your experiences. Would that be okay? Now, if you broadcast that out, a lot of people won't respond. Some people say no, but some people say yes. And then you could talk to maybe 5 people that have one and, see for yourself what they say about it. Especially if they're in sort of prominent high positions that you aspire to be in, that might be useful information they can give you. Hopefully that makes sense. CRR says, how do you rank online MBA programs? Do you go by the specialty you're interested in? Thanks. How do I rank them? Well, normally, first of all, they should be, there's unaccredited and then there's accredited, okay? For example, the thing that I have there is unaccredited. The reason why it's unaccredited and never will be accredited is because there's no evaluations, no assignments, no projects, no exams, nothing. And the reason I did that intentionally is because it's flexible for people. There's some people that just want to come in and they don't want to learn everything. They just want to learn marketing or they just want to learn finance, in which case you can, and you can go really deep. But you don't have to learn HR. You don't have to learn economics, if that's you. Now, this is made to fit a very specific need that some people have. Not everybody's going to be in that boat. A lot of people will choose to spend 5 figures, or 6 figures and get an MBA from a brick and mortar university and do it all that way, right? Which is fine. Obviously that there's advantages to doing that. The disadvantage, of course, is the time involved, a couple of years, and the cost, So this is the other sort of extreme end. Now, it depends what your goals are. You see, you can't really rank, I know that they rank schools and stuff, right? One of the problems with ranking schools that a lot of people complain about is that, the criteria of what you're looking at varies, you know what I'm saying? And sometimes it becomes this thing where your program is more expensive, therefore it must be better. And it's that doesn't necessarily hold up, You could look at it in terms of, do the graduates of that program go on to earn more money? You could look at it that way, right? Or you could actually dive into the academics and see what they're actually teaching and how deep they're going and all this kind of stuff, right? So there's many ways of looking at it. And unfortunately, there's problems with all of them, right? So what I would do if I were you is, if you have your eye on a certain program or a couple of different programs you're kind of trying to choose from, I would do the thing I kind of just described with Emmy Lizeth like a second ago, where I'd get on LinkedIn and I'd do a search for that program. So MBA from whatever school or MBA from whatever provider, right? And, see, first of all, are there any graduates that are, say, in your hometown that have that? What positions are they in? If they're all pumping gas and serving coffee, that tells you one thing. If they're all, CEOs of, multi-billion-dollar or multinational corporations, that tells you something else. You know what I mean? So you could look at it that way firsthand without relying on some intermediary to recommend one to you, right? But there are different types of MBAs. They have specialties in different areas. So you can get an MBA specializing in finance or marketing or entrepreneurship or many other things, change management. My MBA was specializing in finance. So you take a little more finance courses. You know what I mean? So that also muddies the waters because you're comparing apples to oranges, right? So do a multi-pronged approach. Do the thing I said where you do it firsthand, looking for people on LinkedIn that have it, see what their positions are, see if you can talk to them about it. Then look at sort of rankings of schools and stuff. That's one thing to take into account. And then, there might be other things you can do there too. Hello to Sumare. Hello to ER. You're welcome, ER. And you're welcome to Emmy Lizeth. That's like a high five. It's like two hands doing this. And I'm old, so I don't pick up on all the emojis and stuff like that. But it's almost like a high 10 kind of thing. So that's good. Sumane says, I had thoughts about AI proofing my resume. I'm currently, okay, we're talking about resumes. P.S. I have an MBA. Okay. Now I'm going to look at your question. Currently doing some kind of professional financial controlling in a company. I thought getting the most diverse experience would AI proof me. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it depends. Like, listen, I think in general, like this is my amateur opinion here because I'm not an AI expert. But to AI proof your career, you just have to do thinking work as opposed to manual work, doing work, right? You know, especially when it comes to, at the moment, knowledge, right? Like you can do doing work in terms of physical work. You can work with your hands, right? And at the moment, things like AI are not, there's no kind of competition for that, as I understand it, right? Now that may change when we get into robotics. When you have like an AI robot, that might be a little bit different, okay? Personally, I'm looking forward to that. But right now, sort of if you're a knowledge worker, you're moving information around, whether you're on the phone, you're on the computer, you're on the internet, like whatever you happen to be doing as a knowledge worker, if you're trying to AI proof your career, you would try and do more thinking work, especially more creative thinking work, right? Where you're coming up with new and exciting ideas and then putting them in motion, right? That's the stuff that AI right now can't really do. Yeah, it can come up with like generic creative stuff that's not very good. Maybe that'll change in the future as we make progress. But as of right now, like, have you ever tried to read a story written by AI? It's all right, but it's not amazing. You know, it's just not good enough right now to be amazing. So if you want like a really good story, you have to have a human write it, or at least you have to have a human at the helm, perhaps using AI tools, but the human is still in charge of the process, right? So that's kind of where we are right now. The more high-level stuff you do, the more AI-proof you are. So how do you distinguish thinking work from non-thinking work? Well, deciding what to do, making a decision, that's thinking work, right? Doing work is just the manual work that then you do to execute an idea, right? So figuring out what to do is thinking work. Figuring out perhaps how to do it might also be thinking work, but then actually executing it is basically manual work, right? You don't need a lot of intelligence to do the manual work. Once someone has decided what to do and how you're going to do it, right? Then you just simply follow instructions. That's no longer thinking work. Okay, anyway, let's get back on track here. We're talking about MBAs and stuff. So, so we talked about, hopefully I've sold everybody on the idea that like what you learn in an MBA program is good. It's good for business. It's also good for other things in life, like managing your money, like being able to persuade people. You know, as we go through life, you need to not just communicate with people, you need to persuade them. You need to have them behave the way you would have them behave, right? The main thing I talk about on my channel is job search, right? You want to persuade someone to give you a job. That's the whole point of it, right? So there's a lot of persuasion involved in that process, right? You're wanting to convince them. Whatever it is that they need to decide to hire you, you want to find out what that is. You want to give it to them and avoid any red flags so that they do the thing that you want them to do. That's persuasion. An MBA will help you with that. It helps you think. It helps you understand people. One aspect of HR, usually in the field of organizational theory, is leadership and influencing. That's how to get other people to do what you would have them do. If you become a manager, that's a key skill, right? It's one thing to make a plan. It's one thing to coordinate resources, schedules and budgets and, things like this, right? equipment, tools, whatever. It's another thing to then have people follow your plan, right? There are a lot of people out there that they're pretty good at making a plan, but they're pretty ineffective at getting other people to follow the plan, right? What they find is that people sort of do the plan when they feel like it, but when they have problems with what the plan is, what one step or something, they do their own thing, right? They don't feel the need to do it. And the end result is that they didn't actually follow your plan. They did their own thing, right? So influencing is pretty damn important. And, for a variety of things. That's one of the things you learn. So the only real question is, does the cost matter? Now, if you're going into a conventional career, the idea is that if you have an MBA, supposedly, allegedly, your compensation will be higher with the MBA than without it. It'll allow you to get higher level jobs that pay better, right? So you will be making more money. That's the idea. So you look at the MBA as an investment. If you sort of pay for this thing and take 2 years off to do it, right? What does it cost you? Well, it costs you the tuition and everything else associated. If there's living expenses, like you have to support yourself during those 2 years, so you have all those expenses, right? You have the time involved. You have the opportunity cost, because during those 2 years, if you weren't taking the MBA, you'd be making money for 2 years. Now you have to give that up because you're not going to be making that money. Not only do you have to pay to go back to school, but you have to give up making money during those 2 years, right? So you have to look at the total cost of what the MBA is going to cost you. And then you have to see, okay, let's say it costs you, I don't know, if you're taking a top tier university MBA for 2 years, it might cost you $400,000, are you going to make a premium forever after every year, so that the premium you make over and above what you would have been making without the MBA, is that premium going to be enough to justify paying $400,000 for the MBA total cost, right? That's the big question. So that's something that people like to talk about. Now, the problem I have with this process, just personally, is that it's all based on perceptions. You see, when you take a Master's of Business Administration, most of the material is, I hate to say it, it's pretty mundane, it's pretty basic. Like, for example, learning accounting, right? Like, you take a course in accounting, right? Now, do you need, like, some Nobel laureate PhD to teach you accounting? I would say no. The other thing is that knowledge is out in the public domain because it's been around for a very long time. The vast majority of things you learn when you become an accountant is old knowledge. It's stuff we've known for quite a while. It isn't just like hasn't been invented discovered in the last 20 years. You know what I'm saying? So it's out in the public domain. So people can write books on this. They don't have to pay any kind of royalties or copyright for the material just to teach someone accounting. Nobody owns that knowledge. It's out there. You know what I mean? So you can learn that material. Like, for example, you could go, and this is what my course does, by the way, is you look at what textbook is being used in the accounting course, in the MBA program, in a university of your choosing, your favorite MBA program, say Harvard Business School, or, in Canada, we have like Ivy School of Business, and you look up like what textbook they're using, and the professor is essentially teaching out of that book, right? So what you can do is you can find that same textbook on Amazon. Normally it would cost like $120 or something, or equivalent, if it's new. If you find an older edition that's maybe 1 or 2 editions old, where 99% of the content is exactly the same, it could be selling for $10. Now something like accounting, do you need the absolute latest thing that came out this year to learn accounting? I mean, you can argue it either way, but I would say no. So you could essentially get that material for $10. And then you just read it yourself. You do some of the practice problems. You do some of the case studies. And one could argue that then you have like a working knowledge of accounting. You can't work as a professional accountant. You don't have a license, but you know the basics of accounting. You can look at a financial statement. You can understand what's going on, right? So that's, what I would say. Now, paying like 6 figures for an MBA where they teach you this, to me seems really silly, because I don't know what the hell you're learning in there. I mean, you're just learning the same stuff that everybody else learns, Now, what schools try and do, and maybe they're correct in this, I don't know. But it's hard to say whether all schools are correct in this or not. But they claim that, our MBA is worth it because you're going to be sitting in class with fellow students who come from rich families or something. So there's a lot of networking opportunities. So presumably when you come out of school, if you've taken the trouble to connect with all the students around you, maybe get to know them, this kind of thing. Maybe if their father who runs like a big company is hiring, they'll maybe hire you on the strength of the personal recommendation of their son or daughter who went to school with you. To me, that seems kind of weird. I mean, like, I understand why they do it. It's done for a reason. You do maybe get a very good teacher, but is it worth that much? I don't know. I think the jury's out on that. And I've heard all kinds of arguments both ways for it. And so I know there's a lot of people that believe in that, and I know that there's a lot of people that don't. So I'm not here to really, I can't verify everybody's situation. But I've just seen some cases where it's skeptical. That's why I created this, by the way. That's my personal take on it. 912 Racing says, I have an accounting degree. They're very clear that nothing has really changed much in the world of accounting. The same education Harvard would give you would be the same one you would get online. Yeah, exactly. Now, maybe, like I can understand PhD programs. Like you would go to Harvard and you'd be studying under some professor who has a Nobel Prize, and they have a lot of money. They have access to a lot of things. So you could do all kinds of research that would really, it would be a lot easier to do that research at, say, Harvard than it would be some other tin pot university somewhere. Like I get it for doing that kind of thing. But just doing coursework, like I agree with you, 912 Racing. It just seems like it's a bit of a put on. You know what I mean? If you're just doing coursework. And that's what an MBA is. Like you do a project or a thesis at the end of it, depending on your university. But apart from that, master's thesis there, it's pretty mundane. It's you're not discovering new things, really. You do that at the PhD level, not at the master's level. So even that, like you could do your project or you could do your thesis, and it wouldn't really matter. I don't think there's a big advantage in like going to a major university. Like, does it outweigh the exorbitant cost of it? I would say no, but I know there's different perspectives on it, and I'm not like super confident in my own opinion. I would do the thing that I recommended. If you think it's worth it, go and get evidence of it. Go and find the people that are working in amazing jobs because they have that degree. And maybe the degree alone, when you say, I've got a degree here, this piece of paper, that alone opens doors for you. That's a very real thing. I know in the United States, in certain industries, they think like that. But then again, you got to ask yourself, how many people does that apply to? Does that apply across the board? It doesn't. That's like a subset of people. So if you're going to get a degree from Harvard and you're going to work at an investment bank in the States, like Goldman Sachs or something, okay, fair enough. But for everybody else, does that principle hold up? I would say no. No, it doesn't. That's my personal opinion. Okay, I'm going to open it up to questions. We've gotten a lot of questions so far. I'm kind of done with my monologue, so I'm here to answer your questions. anything about MBAs, anything about business school, anything about startups, anything about entrepreneurship. To me, entrepreneurship is one of the really amazing things that you learn in an MBA. Even if you don't decide to be an entrepreneur, like you don't work in entrepreneurship, it's still an amazing thing to learn because it will help you in almost every job that you could have in business, right? Even if you're some cog in some massive machine, you're going to be wanting to do projects. You're going to be wanting to, do new things, new methods. You know what I mean? And thinking like an entrepreneur, understanding what adds value and what doesn't, what is needed to truly test something in the real world and what is not. All that is incredibly useful. And that's what you learn in entrepreneurship. You kind of cut through a lot of the BS, all the bureaucracy, all the, flavor of the month buzzwords and all that. You cut through all that garbage and you learn what's actually essential, for a business entity and how to actually get it off the ground. That's what you learn. Very, very useful. You may have heard something called corporate entrepreneurship. It's this silly term where big companies want to try to think like entrepreneurs. I mean, they can't and they never will, but they like to think that they should do that. At least they've recognized their problem, which is that they don't. So it's a nice sentiment. They want to go in that direction, but they're their own worst enemy and they never will be able to go in that direction, really. It's like the Microsoft jokes of the 90s, Microsoft wouldn't actually create anything of their own, really. They just buy up all the smaller companies that do actually create something valuable, and then run it into the ground. Nokia. Anyway, Skype, I think that's their latest one, isn't it? Skype, it was in the news, was it a week ago or 2 weeks ago? They closed down Skype. That used to be everywhere. It used to be like ubiquitous, for video calling. As soon as Microsoft got their hands on it, they do what they always do. They killed it stone dead. It's amazing. And that's the example of the opposite of entrepreneurial thinking. You get a lot of people that just don't understand business. Now, if you don't understand business and you don't understand technology, I would argue, what the hell are you doing? But that's just me. Okay, there's 27 people here listening to me drone on about nothing in particular. Get in the chat. Let me know what questions you have, what you're struggling with, what you're wondering about in terms of entrepreneurship, in terms of an MBA. Are you thinking of getting an MBA? Are you curious about it? Let me know what's up, and I will try and help you. I have an MBA. I have an MBA course that's benefited a lot of people. By the way, I've also done videos describing the course, so it's as transparent as possible if you're curious about it. And I've applied MBA knowledge in my role as CEO and many other roles on the way up, and also as an entrepreneur. And now I'm kind of a contradiction in terms. I'm a YouTuber also. So, you know what I mean? I built my YouTube channel basically using a lot of principles from the MBA, knowing what are the types of things you should do. These endless sort of decisions, right? Like if you're making videos, for example, you might think like, okay, do I make a small number of videos that are really good, or do I make a large number of videos that are kind of okay? Like there's an obvious decision you have to make. What should you do? What tends to be more successful of the two, right? That's like an example of a mundane decision that you would face one day, and your MBA knowledge will help you to make the right decision. Emil says, I have you on my background as I work. I love your content. Well, thank you, Emil. I appreciate you saying that. That's awesome. I can play elevator music behind me, if that helps you. Kind of a soothing thing. You hear it, you feel pleasant, and you like me more. What do they call it? Muzak, Let me know if you want me to do that. That could put everyone to sleep. Get in the chat. I'm here just to answer questions, so if I don't really get any questions, I can't really do this for much longer, but here we go. Someone says, I have an engineering background, and I'm interested in getting an MBA because I want to start a business in a few years. What core takeaway from an MBA would essential for my development towards that? Okay, I understood everything except for your last sentence. I have an engineering degree, and I have an MBA, so I can relate. I don't know what you mean by essential for. Would be essential for my development towards that? Okay, I think it was just a typo. What core takeaway from an MBA would be essential for my development towards what? Towards taking an MBA? Oh, to starting a business. Okay. In my opinion, okay, all things being equal, an MBA will allow you to start a business. It will. If you don't have an MBA, it's very dangerous. It's like saying, okay, I want to be a Hollywood actor, but I refuse to go to drama school or learn anything about acting. I'm just going to audition and hope that somebody picks me. I'm going to throw something out there and I'm going to hope it works. But I'm not going to do anything really, any of the background work to try and assure myself that it's good. I'm not going to craft it. I'm not going to tailor it. Or I'm going to be an artist. I'm going to do sculpture, but I'm not going to take any classes on how to do sculpture. I'm just going to do it because I'm a free spirit and then just hope that people will buy my sculpture for millions of dollars, right? That's kind of what it's like, okay? Now, in some basic industries, like for example, the construction business, the residential construction business, where like everyone and their brother can become a contractor, right? What you can do is, because it's such a mature industry and such a basic industry, is you can observe what other people are doing and then just go into business doing that, right? So if you have a trade, or even if you don't have a trade, like you just build decks or something, you can copy what other people are doing and just replicate it, except you call yourself a new name, sometimes not even very original, and bam, you're in business, right? And in some situations that'll work. Do you need an MBA? No. You can make some money, but imagine how much more money you could have made if you have an MBA, if you actually understand business and you understand money, right? You know what I mean? So an MBA is the scientific study of how to make money. That's what it is. That's what business is. It's essentially the scientific study of how to make money. Okay, everything else that you would learn in, under the umbrella of business is subordinate to that one goal, right? So, like, how would that be useful? Well, it would speak directly to the purpose of business, which is to make money. Now, having had a lot of experience with entrepreneurs who are also engineer types, technical types, and I'm referring also to myself too, incidentally, they have one big blind spot, and that is that they tend to blur the line between a business and a research project, right? You see, a research project is like something you do, it's purely in operations. It's not marketing, it's not finance, it's operations. Okay, so let's say you want to develop an app. Okay, like you're a developer, you write code, and you want to create an app, right? Well, you have an ambition to create an app. Just being able to do that and have it in the Apple Store or something is going to be a feather in your cap. It's going to be something you can put on your resume, and it will give you a sense of accomplishment, a sense of self-worth, right? You could say, I have this, and no one can take it away from you, right? Okay? But the problem is you get a lot of would-be entrepreneurs who are technical types. They know a lot about writing code, but they don't know anything about business. They don't know anything about marketing. Okay, so they say, I'm starting a business, I'm going to be a developer, and they create an app. Great, and they achieve the goal. They finish their app, they get it in the store, right? But the problem is that nobody buys it, and it doesn't make any money. So it fails as a business because the whole point of business is to make money. Now, if you just wanted to do a research project to write an app, just some fun hobby project, you can do that. There's absolutely no harm. There's no harm whatsoever in it. If people use it, great. If people don't use it, fine, because it was just, you're doing it for yourself, right? So I've seen and I've worked with a lot of those types of people, technical people that don't know anything about people, they don't know anything about marketing, they don't know much about business. They delude themselves that they're in business because they're creating an app. But it's not business. It's a research project. You sink money and time into it, but it's not producing revenue, it's not selling, And then they wonder where they went wrong when they get to the end and they see that nobody's buying it, right? Well, where they went wrong was before they even started. They took the wrong approach. They didn't set out with customers at the center of what they were doing. They set out with their own satisfaction and their own goals as the center of what they were doing. Personal goals, Now, when you take an MBA, you learn formally why that's not what you do, right? You learn that, no, the whole point of business is to fill a need or a want. And if you do, you can make money. If you don't, you can't make money, in which case it's a failure. You understand all the time and effort and money you put into it is a loss, right? So that's the big blind spot for people like us, okay? And this was Chigozi, if I'm saying that right. I'm sure I'm not. I apologize. Okay, but just don't fall into that trap. So take an MBA, learn about money, learn about marketing. These will round out your probably really sharp technical skills that you already have, okay? And give you a much more balanced perspective as to what you need to do and what's going on and how to do it. 912 Racing says, I'm a former paralegal getting my MBA because I want to be the ops manager of a law firm or corporate legal development. An owner of an HR firm told me it would help me be more competitive. Okay, if they say so. I mean, it doesn't seem to me like you would necessarily need an MBA to do that, right? I think if they're recommending it to you, not to be cynical or anything, because, I'm never cynical. I think they don't know what they're talking about. I would guess that they themselves don't have an MBA. I mean, I don't know, but just someone saying this. And even if they know what they're talking about, and even if they do have an MBA, this recommendation, it's based more on perception than anything real, than its intrinsic value. Will an MBA help you be a better ops manager, operations manager in a law firm? I don't think so. Because the only part of, I'm assuming the ops manager doesn't deal with a lot of financial type stuff directly. They may process, some accounting processes, right? They might do journal entries and ledger stuff and, transactions and EFTs and all that, but they don't actually make financial decisions or anything. You know what I mean? They're not doing the books. They might possibly be a bookkeeper, maybe, but beyond that, they're not doing anything really with accounting. So they certainly don't need marketing, I don't think, to do that. Do you need influence? Are you managing a team of a ton of people? No. You know what I mean? So the only real area it seems like that would apply to you would be operations. And of that stuff that you learn in operations, how much would that apply to an office manager or an operations manager of a law firm? You're not running a factory. You're not planning out an entire supply chain like something big. You're just dealing with I don't know, 20 lawyers maybe, and their paralegals and support staff. That doesn't seem like you need an MBA to do that. You know what I mean? I mean, you could maybe do it a little bit better if you have an MBA, I suppose, but it doesn't seem like it's really essential. But then again, I'm not a paralegal, I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know. I don't know what's involved. That's just my first impression. So I would corroborate that. Now, what the obvious thing you can do 912 racing, okay? The obvious thing you can do is that thing I've already mentioned a couple of times today. Go on LinkedIn and look at other paralegals or ops managers in law firms. Find these people on LinkedIn, preferably in your hometown. Look at their background. Do they all have MBAs? If they do, I stand corrected. Get an MBA. That's what it seems to need. For whatever reason, they all seem to have one. So therefore, might not be the worst idea. I would try and find out why you need it. Is it all just perception, or is there some really advanced skills that you need? I'd go a bit deeper. But if you look at all these people, find all the people working at the law firms in your hometown, the operations managers. Now, if none of them have MBAs, that's going to tell you something. Why is this person telling you that you should go get one? Because getting a 2-year degree is not like, it's just quick and easy thing like that. There's some effort and cost and time involved. So don't do it for this reason if this reason is bogus. Go and get some evidence that this is true. Okay, so that's what I would recommend. Okay, channel member, a Mausch, says, I have an engineering degree and moved in assurance function after 10 years of practice as an operations engineer for the past 10 years. Have been in assurance with several assurance certifications. Okay, that's all one sentence. Is there any need to have an MBA to join the senior management leadership of an energy company? Oh, I can't answer that. I mean, first of all, what country are you in? Secondly, I don't know. I mean, I don't work in the energy, in an energy company of, the executive leadership position. You would have to get that from the source, okay? This is where informational interviews are going to be the tool you use to be able to get that exact information. So what you do is you go on LinkedIn, okay? You connect yourself to people who are executives in, energy companies in your country, in your region, like preferably in your hometown, because then you can go and speak to them face to face, right? Okay? Learn how to get an informational interview. That's not something I can explain in 2 minutes. Like, there's a lot to it, but learn how to do that. Like, learn how to connect to these people on LinkedIn. That's how you discover them. And then that's how you can then connect to them, right? Okay, you send them a message. You try to get an informational interview where you go and meet with them. It has nothing to do with getting a job. You don't mention jobs. You don't take a resume of yours with you, because that's not what this is about. You're there to sit down with them and ask them a few questions and learn, right? And one of the questions they're going to be asking is this. Like if you wanted to be, to be in their role or their position, or in their circles, do you need to have an MBA to join? Like, what's their attitude? Is it pretty much regarded as essential, or like, is it essential for younger people, or is it not? Are people even thinking about that? I would say yes. Like, if you're an executive, an MBA is kind of like expected. I mean, it's not absolutely essential. It's not. Put it this way: there's a lot of executives that don't have MBAs, right? Now, how did those executives get there? Well, usually they got there by being the founders of the company that helped build it up from the very beginning. And they've earned the trust of the founders, right? So either they're the founders themselves, or they were one of the original employees that has earned the trust of the founders and helped them as they built up that entire business, right? Okay, that's usually where a lot of executives who don't have MBAs come from. They might not have an MBA, but they have a track record of a lot of success, right? That's what's gotten them there. Okay, but usually when you're operating at that level, having basic business knowledge, like what you would get with an MBA, knowing how all the elements of business work, that's kind of necessary, You need to understand finance. You need to understand the language of money. You just do, if you're an executive. You also need to understand like how to influence people. And you need to be a representative for your organization, just almost permanently, like 24 hours a day. You know what I mean? They need people that understand this. They need people that can present themselves very professionally, because when you're an executive, you're going to be interfacing with all kinds of players in your industry. Either to find out information or to make strategic partnerships or to work together, and you're going to be representing your organization. You have to do it. So there's like a political element there too, as well as a sales element. So you can see like a lot of these elements are starting to come into play, all the areas of the MBA, right? So if that's your ambition, I would say yes, but get evidence of that, okay? Number one, find all these executives on LinkedIn, see if they have MBAs. That's the most obvious thing. Then go one step beyond, do a second thing, and try to get informational interviews with some of these people and ask them, like I'm assuming an MBA is required. Is that the case? Is it essential? What do you have to say? Do that, right? And that'll paint a clear picture. Okay, 912 Racing says, yeah, he said it's mostly perceptive because the partners will want someone who can handle business stuff so they can be left alone to practice law. It's mostly perceptive because the partner wants someone to handle the business stuff so they can be left alone to practice. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, I don't know the exact role of an ops manager in a law firm, at least in the kind that you're talking about. So, fair enough. Like, it's based on perception. I hate the term optics. I know people use that term. It's based on optics. I prefer the term perception, but whatever. Anyway, just a reminder to people, if you're watching this, if you're interested in an MBA, check out this. This might be an option for you. The $100 MBA, the course that I have. It's technically a course, but really it's a program. It's modeling a program. It's an MBA is a program. It's a collection of courses, right? And, so I offer this, which is a solution for some people. It's unaccredited, but if you just care about the knowledge itself, this thing kicks ass because it allows you to have access to all the knowledge for very cheap. It's also extremely flexible. So you don't have to quit your job to learn this material. You could do it, on the weekends. You could do it, in the evenings, whatever works for you. You can also go at your own pace, right? That's something that a lot of educational programs don't provide when you're taking them from a university or something. And the third thing is that if you don't need the entire, program, you're just interested in one or two areas. You're interested in marketing, and maybe you're interested in, organizational theory, like leadership and influencing. That's what you care about, right? So you can do that too. You could take the program and you just only deal with those two topics, right? It's like saying, I'm going to take this program, but I'm only going to take 2 of the 10 courses. Usually you can't do that in the university. So with this, you can. And the other way it's flexible is that you could do the whole thing, but instead of going super in depth into everything, you could just skim a lot of it, or all of it if you wanted, if that's what you're wanting to do. Just get a basic understanding of everything rather than an in-depth understanding. And that way you could do it in substantially reduced time, and it will just hold your interest, if you're not really interested in going deep into all these topics. So it's far more flexible. So that's why I created it. It's $100. The catch is that it's entirely self-study. So you get a reading list essentially, and you can order all the books on Amazon for very cheap. They're the same books that are used in the top tier universities in the world that are in English, and a place like Harvard Business School, things like this, and their MBA program. And you get the same book. And instead of having a professor, essentially read it to you, teach the course out of a book, you got the book and you can read it yourself on your own schedule, and you can do all the problems if that's what you want to do. And you get the same result, but it's far more flexible and it's a hell of a lot cheaper. So for a lot of people, that's been a good solution for them. It's been a very popular course. A lot of people have taken it. So if that's you, if that serves your needs, check it out. There's a link in the description. It's not for everyone. If you still want the 2-year accredited university degree, like from a brick and mortar university that you physically go to, when you go and you're an extroverted type and you network with the people in your class and stuff like that, and with the professors and all this, if that's what you're going to do, hey, that's fine. You pay for that. You pay like substantially more for that. But if you're just looking for the knowledge, this is an alternative, right? And then there's a lot of halfway house solutions out there too. Things that are like online MBAs that are accredited. So they're cheaper than like going to university, but you're paying maybe like $4,000 or $5,000, something like that. But it's accredited, and you get about the same out of it as this, certainly. So there's all kinds of different solutions out there. But what I'd recommend is that, you learn business. I'd recommend everyone learns business, even if it's just to manage your own money, or to persuade people either to give you a job or to come with you. And in some sense, you want to do something and you want people to help you, the ability to persuade them and to get them to buy into whatever it is that you're doing. That's pretty powerful, Anyway. Okay, I'm going to wind this down in a minute. So if you have any last minute questions, ask them now or forever hold your peace. Later this afternoon, I'm doing a collaborative live stream, once again with Abby from the YouTube channel Life Work Balance. I don't know if you've ever been to her channel. She is a recruiter or former recruiter. She has her own YouTube channel. She talks about a lot of the stuff I do. And what we do is we answer questions just like this. So you can ask a question about job search and you can get my answer and her answer together. You get her perspective from the recruitment side and my perspective from the CEO hiring manager side. And there you go. It'll be fun. And we're both very friendly and hilarious. So you could show up for that too. Okay, I think I'm going to be winding this down. So thanks everyone for showing up today. This entrepreneurship is a wonderful topic. It really is the key to take your career in your hands. You don't have to rely on an intermediary for you to make money. You could do it yourself. Wherever you go, whatever the economic conditions, you can create an income for yourself. That's an incredible skill. Very, very useful. I encourage everyone to learn all you can about this stuff. Jared Parmer says, side hustle idea, at-home computer help for retirees. Word of mouth, and there's a real market here, but we will move in 2 to 3 years. Also, how, aside from experience, can I leverage into a new hustle? In my new home, I mean. Well, you've got a very specific market there. So retirees. So I imagine it's going to be about building relationships with retirees. So I think it will require more. Listen, not knowing anything about that business myself, not having dealt with retirees and computer help, but I would imagine that a lot of it will be based on a personal relationship with them. So going and meeting the people in person, possibly, or at least gaining a real deep understanding of what they're looking at. So if you want to advertise or you want to communicate with them, you can reach them. It'll require that, right? You really have to get to know your customers. That's the kind of fundamental truth of business. You have to get to know your customers. How do you reach them? What do you say to them? You know what I mean? How do you spin it? How do you pitch it? What are they looking for? If there's a real need, they might have a real need, but how do you then convince them that you're the one to fill that need? You know what I'm saying? Maybe they think, okay, I've got a computer, I need someone to fix it or to maintain it. They figured that much out, but they just assume that they'll go to, I don't know, Best Buy or something, a Geek Squad or whatever to do it. You know what I mean? Like, how do you convince them that it's you they should go to instead of someone else? So that's where you'd have to have a closer relationship with your customers. You'd have to have a sort of closer interaction with them. Okay, so that's kind of something that to look into. And I mean, I don't know anything personally about those industries, so I can't help you with the specifics. But that's what the problem that you'd have to solve, right? So I don't know if that's much help, but I wish you the best of luck with it, Jared. And thanks for putting your side hustle idea in the chat, like I was trying to get people to do at the beginning. So thank you for taking me up on that. Okay, I'll be back in about 45 minutes with a different live stream. You guys are awesome. I will be back same time next week with another edition of Side Hustle Ideas, where we could talk about entrepreneurship and side hustles. And I will see you then. Take care of yourselves.